segment of millennials and more specifically Gen Zs in the way they behave are fairly different from the earlier segments and the older segments, right? And one of the key differences I feel is this set of consumers are very open about their flaws. They celebrate their flaws rather. They are more transparent and they expect similar behavior from the brands they associate with. And that has to a large extent forced brands to also be more open and have a ownership of what they do, and more specifically when it comes to communication. So that's one big change I would assume these consumers have made. The other piece is this sort of consumers are very decisive, and they want to be treated as individuals and not as a part of larger cohorts. And that has also forced brands to look at them in a very segmented manner and look at options and look at technologies to provide personalized messaging to them. For instance, automation has been a big enabler in this area. So that's another big area, I think, how brands have been forced to change some of the way they communicate to these consumers. They use digital discovery as a big part of how they shop, and hence that makes it necessary for the brands to be a part of their consumer journey plan, be a part of their whole narrative of how they approach their shopping. So these are the 3-4 big changes I would assume the Gen Zs more specifically, and also some bit of millennials who have driven in terms of communication. Yeah. I think, in my view, it's very difficult to sell to these consumers to that extent. When I say sell, it is tough because these consumers do not want the whole traditional way of communication and advertising, which is more preachy, more in your face, intrusive. So I think, so that's one bit of it. And when it comes to how do we still, and there's still ways to reach out to them. However, I believe that the role for the newer marketeer is tougher as compared to what the earlier marketing role was, because of the complexity of this consumer segment. And I think one of the ways to reach out to them is to be transparent and honest as a brand, because that's what they really value, like I said earlier. And the other piece about this segment, I believe, is they do believe in instant gratification. So I think it's not just the marketing or communication, it's about the whole piece of how the brand would need to evolve their business model to deliver to this consumer segment. Things like omni-channel, automation, AI, for instance, will really help us to sharply segment and offer to this consumer what they want in real time, literally. So I think these are the 2-3 ways we can reach out to this consumer. I have already spoken about the whole piece on digital discovery is a key enabler for this set of consumers. And at the end of it, I think brand experience is what matters to them, because one big difference from the earlier set of consumers, I believe, is that Gen Zs have moved away from the whole ownership economy to a more sharing economy, where they value experiences far more than assets, physical assets. And hence that also makes it necessary and important for brands to deliver to this aspiration or emerging aspiration of the set of consumers. I think expectations it's like a moving target, right? So it's difficult to map an expectation, and it constantly keeps evolving. More specifically with the new set of consumers and the access to information that's available online today and across the multiple touch points, it's very critical for brands to then have a very strong and a clear promise. So it's about setting the expectations right before even the consumers are able to experience your brand, because I believe that the consumers are not just setting their expectations today purely by the brand communication. I think there's a much wider ecosystem that's at play here. So there are influencers, there are micro-influencers, there are the social media chatter that's happening around your brand. You may or may not as a brand do it or be a part of it, but that's already happening. So brands, the consumers are already experiencing your brand to that extent, and hence forming perceptions, forming opinions about your brand. And it's very critical that at this juncture you are able to set that expectations right. And hence it's imperative that we have as a brand have a very sharp and clear brand promise, and that is aligned to what the consumer needs are. So having a deep and intimate knowledge of your consumers is equally important, and then aligning your brand promise. So before the consumer really it starts experiencing your product in a conscious way, it's important that the brands start appearing organically. So you'll have to make your ecosystem work in a way that you start appearing organically in their consumer journey plan. So they start seeing your relevance. And after that is done, I think then the last mile about working very hard to deliver on your brand promise, because finally that's what matters. If he or she is coming with a certain brand promise that you have enabled through the ecosystem, then you need to deliver on it. Regional influencers, for instance, play a critical role in South market as versus some of the Northern Belt markets where it's largely the national influencers which influence the consumers. The other big one, closer home for us as an apparel brand, is the whole retail segment. Southern market has a much stronger retail, and not to say that Northern market is not, but within apparel space, when I see, South is a key market for retail brands. So there are a plethora of retail brands available, and that makes this market even more relevant and exciting for us. Traditional media, for instance, press, outdoor, still is a critical market for this, a critical media rather for this consumer segment, more specifically down south. With the consumers evolving and migrating across cities, and that's true largely for the bigger metros within south and north, these nuances are blurring, and there are more and more, these things are getting merged more and more. However, having said that, there are still these 2-3 bits which I feel are different when it comes to northern market versus the southern market, specifically when it comes to retail brands like us. AI and automation for mass customization, transparency and sustainability. I think those would be inspiring, unique, and purposeful. I think in my mind it has to be the Nike Colin Kapernick campaign, which was very polarizing. It did a lot of good for the brand, while of course like I said, it polarized opinions in a big way, but finally it delivered, and it showed when a brand really believes in what it stands for, finally what it delivers to the brand. So yeah, I would rate that as one of the most exciting and prominent campaigns of 2018.